last week, Liberal Senator Cory Bernardi called for Australia to ban the burqa in public. Senator Bernardi's comments prompted a deluge of debate about the traditional Muslim attire.
Today we're going to get a perspective of a woman who was raised in a Christian household before converting to Islam as a teenager. Please welcome to the Circle, Susan Carland. Thank you so much, Susan, for joining us on the Circle.
Thank you for having me.
Maybe if we can hit this news angle first, following Senator Cory Bernardi's comments. I just wanted to quote him and get your response to this. He said that the burqa represents the repressive domination of men over women, which has no place in our society. What are your thoughts about that comment?
It's problematic, I think, because first of all, it assumes that all the women that are wearing the burqa or the hijab or the niqab or any other clothing are doing so solely because the men in their lives are making them, and that's simply not the case. Certainly in some circumstances, in some countries around the world it is. But in Australia, I know a number of women who choose to cover their face, and often one of my friends, for example, does it despite her husband not wanting her to. So it's very much their own personal choice. It's something that they feel really good and positive about, and I feel very uneasy about a man who has probably not spoken to any woman who covers her face telling us why she does what she does without having heard their opinion at all.
Can you explain to me why you would choose to do that?
Well, look, I obviously can't speak entirely on their behalf, but I just know from the friends who I've spoken to that do it, and you need to know in Australia, very, very few women do it. We're talking, you know, maybe 100 or so. It's a very small amount. They just see it as being a positive expression of their spirituality. They see it as something that it works for them. It's not for me, but if it works for them, I think they should be allowed to dress how they want to. It's something that I guess it helps them feel closer to their creator, and if it works for them, you know, I don't see it as an issue.
Susan, you're a lecturer in politics at Monash University in Melbourne. Tell us about your journey from Christianity to Islam.
Well, it's not very interesting, but I was raised in... I had a lovely upbringing with my family. I had a very positive experience at the church, so it certainly wasn't... my conversion certainly wasn't out of a horrid rejection of the church or anything like that. I loved going to Sunday school, but it was when I was about 17, I started to wonder, why do I believe what I do? Is it because I think it's true, or is it just because I've been raised to believe this? And so I decided to look into other religions and no religion to see what made sense to me. But except for Islam, that was the last one on the list because I thought it looked sexist and outdated and barbaric and all the standard stereotypes. But I found, despite myself, when I would stumble across information about Islam, that it actually surprisingly made a lot of sense to me when I stripped away all the politics and propaganda and sensationalism and actually got down to what the religion said about itself. It was very beautiful, very peaceful, very logical, and it just really resonated with me. But it wasn't until I was 19 that I decided to become Muslim because I was worried about how my family and friends would react. And it was a big decision, but it got to the stage where I just knew, look, this is what makes sense to me and I can't live my life to make other people happy. This is what feels authentic for me. And so when I was 19, I changed religions.
It's funny, Susan, because most people, when they turn their back on their Christianity, they become atheists and smoke pot and stuff. But you decided to pick something else up that's, you know, that's altogether different.
Yeah.
What do you think of the perception that Islam does try to control the expression of women?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a very common perception, and I think because it's something that I hear about so often and asked about so often, my PhD is specifically on that. My PhD is about the way Muslim women fight sexism in their own traditions and communities, because the reality is, since the advent of Islam, we've had these amazing women who have been getting their rights through their religion, using their religion to get the rights that they want, such as the right to divorce and education and autonomy, from the beginning of time right up until today. But very few people are aware there's this idea that Muslim women need to be rescued from themselves and from their religion, from their culture. And it's so sad that it's seen that way, because not only is it incorrect, it's quite offensive to Muslims, to Muslim women and the community as a whole.
Do you think, though, that is because of literally because of the dress? Because if you look at lots of different religions, all based on faith, but the dress is the one point of difference. Why do you think people have such an issue with the dress?
It is interesting, isn't it? Because I think if we think of the way a nun traditionally used to dress in a habit, it's actually quite similar to the way a lot of Muslim women dress. But when we look at a nun, we see that as a positive, pious, she's very spiritual and good. And yet when we see a Muslim woman dress like that, people often feel a bit taken aback and, well, she's a fundamentalist and her husband makes her and she wants to change the rules of our country. So I think a lot of it is the cultural baggage that we bring to it. And I think if people could just talk to each other and realise, well, hey, actually, you're just like me. And you probably wear it for very similar reasons to the reasons that a nun used to dress that way.
And is is it for the reason to educate people and inform people? Is it so that you save the beautiful part of a female body just for the family?
To an extent it is. I think ultimately the reason, every Muslim woman will say they wear it for different reasons, but ultimately we do it as an act of worship. It's an act of faith to God. Like everything else that we do, the way we dress is an act of worship.
Can I put something to you? This is a Jewish friend of mine who is not terribly orthodox, but she follows the dietary rules, which is, no bottom feeders, no shellfish and no pork. She says to me that it's not a big deal in terms of how she assesses her spirituality, but every single time she sits down to eat, she's reminded that she's Jewish. Is it sort of like that, your way of keeping that close and present?
Definitely, and I've had women say that to me. Wearing a scarf is like a tangible reminder to them of their connection to God. Other women say, I do it as a feminist statement. I like the fact that when I go out, people aren't judging me entirely on how I look, and that we live in a society where women's bodies are commodified, and they used to sell everything from toothpaste to screwdrivers, and they say, I'm trying to challenge that. So there's a lot of different reasons that are in it, but I've never once had a woman say to me, I wear it because my husband makes me. It's far, far more common for a woman to say to me, my husband wishes I wouldn't, my parents wish I won't, I don't wear it at home, and then when I get out, I sneak around the corner and put it on. So this is very much something that these women are choosing for themselves.
Thank you so much, Susan, for joining us on The Circle. A very informative and interesting chat. Please thank Susan Carland.
Thank you very much. Thank you.